So you're not going to bite on the religion argument?
Secular regimes do not necessarily portend failure. However, separation of church and state would be necessary in having a stable government, as seen in our First Amendment, which prohibits Congress from inhibiting religion or establishing a church. Therefore, through civic virtue as well as a separation of church and state, George Washington was able to set precedents of civic virtue and not having a state religion when he took office.
The framers also realized the importance of a non-religious separation of church and state, and they included the Sixth Amendment and the idea that there does not need to be a religious test to take office.
My colleague means Article 6.
Article 6.
You point out that the founders were trying to balance a lot of different things. Certainly among those things were the fear of chaos and disorder on one hand and of tyranny on the other. Based on their actions, which do you think they feared most?
I would have to agree with Alexander Hamilton when he stated in Federalist 9 that democracy could lead to the perpetual vibrations between the extremes of anarchy and tyranny. So I suggest that the founders were more afraid of an overwhelming democracy, which is reflected in their somewhat elitist system of government which they created.
However, reflecting on the principles set forth in the Declaration of Independence, the framers were very afraid of establishing a monarchy in America or the equivalent of just an omnipotent president, and therefore, through Article 2, there are numerous, the president's role is defined, however, it is checked by, for example, the Congress as well as the judicial branch, in that there are certain regulations that the president cannot step into. For example, he cannot establish legislation without congressional approval, and Congress is the one that implements legislation and not the president.
The text seems to agree with one of the premises of the question here. The question talks about America's founding generation, which in the text goes somewhere from the Declaration of Independence through the drafting of the United States Constitution. And so I'm curious if you have found in your examination of any state constitutions principles that also address this question. Did any of the drafters of state constitution use Rome as an example and a warning in ways that might have been instructive in 1787?
Our own Florida state constitution has provisions that exemplify the framers of our own constitution's desire to implement a sort of rule of law, and that can be seen in the oath of office that our representatives and our leaders are supposed to take before they hold office.
And you think that derives from Rome?
It derives from their wanting to use Rome as an example for its warnings.
Because law was the lifeblood of Rome, and this incessant belief in natural law, which was given forth by Cicero, for example, was that law must be the highest law of the land, and Aristotle once stated that the rule of law is superior to that of any man. Therefore, by having limited government, which is reflected in rule of law, this is how states have adopted the principles of the Roman Senate.
Furthermore, the Florida guarantee of a right to education reflects the Roman concept that educating its citizens and creating a civically virtuous body was central to a republican nation.
Additionally, since it's on a more local level, it reflects the principle of having homogeneous societies, and having a state is reflective of this classical republican ideal.
Additionally, the right to free speech found in the Florida Constitution is reflective of the free speech that was guaranteed in the Roman Republic, which was a very highly esteemed form of speech in the Republic.
Great, thank you.
You know, you mentioned the movement away from the aristocracy, which represents the pride and greed of the few, as opposed to the populist, to the popular scrutiny and popular equality that would foster liberty. Populist equality would foster liberty. And I wonder today, after the Citizens United case, which the Supreme Court decided that corporations would be able to sit in the same shoes as natural persons for purposes of donating money to political causes. Haven't we created a new aristocracy in a sense of those with access to deep pockets of money that can influence the legislative process?
I would absolutely agree with you that we have created a pseudo-aristocracy based on the fact that being economically being affluent gives
An advantage.
gives a candidate an advantage in that they can buy more media space, put themselves before the public eye. Furthermore, the way in which the Electoral College is chosen, which gives priority to the greatest contributors to political parties, points to a pseudo-aristocracy. And the fact that only 30% of the population votes in off-year elections points to the fact that we have created a political elite, which reflects that so few people are interested in government that the pseudo-aristocracy has risen to govern.
But I want to focus the question a bit. Citizens United was about the status of corporations as persons. Does that have a corrupting influence on a Republican form of government?
While it does corrupt the political process in some sense, it is important to balance the right of speech, and this money that is being donated to political candidates is a form of speech and must be protected in some senses. However, in having no limitations on public donations, the Citizens United case should have not lifted all restrictions on donations by these organizations and protected the equality in being able to run for public office and not having a sort of democratic elite. However, through the system of federalism, one can gain name recognition without monetary support and have an equal opportunity in being able to run for a candidate.